Welcome to another exciting episode of Defeating the Darkness, True Crime Stories with Downtown Heather Brown. That's me, Heather Brown. I'm your host, and I am a former prosecutor from the Orange County District Attorney's Office. I worked for 10 years in the sexual assault unit, 5 years in homicide. I retired. I am now a criminal defense attorney, but more importantly, I work as special counsel for Fight for Survivors, where we litigate cases against the churches, the organizations, and the schools that cover up child sexual abuse. And we love to stick it to them. Anyway, speaking of someone who likes to stick it to them, today our very, very special guest is Detective Julissa Trapp. She goes by Julie to her friends and family. I have been calling her Julissa, but I'm going to call you Julie now. Anyway, today we have Detective Trapp with us from Anaheim Police Department, who was a homicide detective for many, many years. She and I worked on a bunch of cases throughout our career, but the one that we're going to talk about today is the case of People versus Stephen Gordon and Frank Cano. These were two cold-blooded serial killers that were kidnapping, raping, and murdering women that were working as prostitutes here in Orange County. And I even hate to say that they were working as prostitutes in my characterization of the story. They were. However, that is not what defines these women.
No.
They were lovely young ladies whose lives were cut short by these monsters. And Detective Trapp, and her diligent hard work and dedication to justice, fought and solved this case and brought both of them to justice. One is now sitting on death row, which Gavin Newsom ripped out and dismantled and destroyed, and he's probably got an iPad somewhere listening to this podcast for all we know. And Frank Cano is now has life without parole. So, welcome, Detective Trapp.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my God, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you here. And so we needed to, before we even get into the nitty gritty of this horrible, horrible case that you solved and brought the light to. That's why I brought you on this podcast, is because, you know, I'm sitting here thinking about who would be a great guest to interview about a case maybe we worked together or a case you worked. And I immediately thought of you. I've been bugging you since I started the podcast, even before I started it, to come onto the podcast. And I want to talk about this case, but we've handled many cases over the years.
We have, going back to our sexual assault days.
Yes.
That's when I first met you. And I knew then you were a spitfire that I wanted to continue to work with. So it's definitely been an honor to work with you throughout the years.
Well, right back at you, sister. So let's talk about you. You are a detective? What are you? Tell me now what you're doing.
I was a detective for many, many years, 20 years as a matter of fact, in various different units. I started in the domestic violence, physical child abuse unit. And from there, I moved to sex crimes. And I was in sex crimes for, I call it a sentence. It was a sentence for 3.5, almost 4 years. And from there, I knew I always wanted to be a homicide detective. And a lieutenant had given me some advice that if I wanted to be a homicide detective and be good at it, you needed to work the precursors to murders. And that was domestic violence, sexual assault, and gangs. And I took that advice very seriously, and I worked all 3 units. So after I worked the sexual assault unit, I went to the gang unit. And I was there for 3.5 years. And then I finally went to homicide, where I spent the bulk of my career, 14 years.
Wow. It's a long clip.
Yes.
So, but how long were you actually, how long were you actually a police officer?
So I've been a police officer now for 27 years.
What?
27
What are you, like 32 since you were 4 years old? Come on.
Yeah, bless
I don't even think I did my
heart.
math right. 5 years. That's why I became a lawyer.
27 years. And I recently got a wild hair up my butt and decided that I was going to try becoming a supervisor. So I took the sergeant's test last year. This year. And by the grace of God, I somehow made it. And so here I am.
You're Sergeant Trapp now.
I am Sergeant Trapp now, yes.
What? Okay.
Back out on the streets, the mean streets of Anaheim.
All right. Anacrime, you mean? Okay. So that's what they call it, right? Anacrime?
I mean, it's...
Fondly.
Yeah.
Fondly.
Yes.
Those in the business. Okay, but I got to say, I'm happy for you because I know that a promotion is always a promotion, right? It's a promotion and title. No less important. It's very important. And there, I'm guessing, is a pay bump, which is important. But boo, I'm sad. We need you as a homicide detective or a sexual assault detective. I'm okay if other people do gangs, but we need you. You can't leave. The community needs you, Detective Trapp.
Oh, that's very sweet. I mean, I feel like, it was honestly the hardest decision I have ever had to make. And I prayed on it a lot. And I think even the day of the test, I thought about turning around and changing my mind. But, I'm getting close to retirement and, the next generation is coming and they're just as important. And if I can hopefully help somebody else that wants to follow my footsteps and get there and be great at it, then I feel like it's my responsibility to help this newer generation and to create another great homicide detective, another great sexual assault detective, because I've had the pleasure of working with the newer officers now for 4 months, and there is a lot of talent out there. And so I keep trying to find my purpose, and I think that that's it. And if anything else, it's kind of a soft landing because retirement was going to come one way or another. And so it was going to be hard to leave regardless. So
yeah, I bet. It was hard for me. I got to tell you, that's one of the reasons I'm doing this is, reliving my glory days, if you will, but also, it's a little more lonely. I don't see all the people and, work all of those cases. I still have my own, criminal cases and whatnot, but it's just not the same. There was a lot of camaraderie and I loved what I did. And so I understand that, like, at some point you only have so many trials in you. You only have so many sleepless nights. That's one of the things I'd like when we talk today to impart to the listeners is that working in the underbelly of crime, every day it takes a little piece of your soul with it, especially when you're working in the darkest places. When you're working a homicide case or a sexual assault case where some, little child has been horribly sexually assaulted. Yeah. And you're on the front lines and you're dealing with the family, or in the homicide unit, the death notifications, right? Like people,
they never get easier.
People forget, like the beat cops out there and the detectives that have to go knock on someone's door and tell them, like, your daughter, your mom, your sister, your friend, your, wife is never coming home. And that's a horrible thing. That's horrible news to have to deliver to someone. And, I don't wish that on anyone. And it affects you and it replays in your mind and it causes you sleepless nights.
Oh, 100%.
And that lack of sleep can really affect you, especially as you get older. Not that we're old, but it can affect you. It affects a lot about your body and your ability to heal and your pains and your aches. And it really does takes an emotional but a physical toll on you, the job.
Oh, 100%. They jokingly say that when you get up to detectives, just especially in homicide, the detective 10, it adds 10 pounds to you just from not sleeping. Well, I was on my second decade, so I think my detective 10 went to like detective 20. So, going back to patrol is definitely helping a little bit. But yeah, it's hard not to internalize, what you see, and death notifications were the worst part of the job and they never got easier. And it's not natural for a mother to bury her child. And that's one of the things with homicide cases that, especially the Anaheim Homicide Unit, why they're so successful is they handle each of them the same. We always have. It doesn't matter who that victim is. And one of the things about death notifications is you realize that everybody has a mother and they all cry the same. And they all miss them. And it doesn't matter what walk of life they were in, what they were doing at the time. That pain is the same universally. And it's one of the things that we agree upon in the whole entire world, right? You shouldn't murder another person.
No, hands down. It's bad.
Yeah.
Murder is bad and evil, and it causes tremendous trauma and pain to everyone who's affected by it. And that goes without saying. I'd like to believe that it does, but there's people out there that really don't think like that. Like the murderers that you have hunted down for, over a decade, for 14 years. So hats off to you for, coming towards the end of your career and wanting to bring up the next generation and school them on how it's done. Because if anybody knows how it's done, it's you. And I mean that sincerely. I have worked with a ton of great detectives over the years, whether it be in sexual assault or the homicide unit. And you were definitely the cream of the crop. I'm just even running through my brain right now to think of anybody better, to be honest with you.
Well,
until my next guest and I tell them, and I'm just kidding, they were the best. No, I mean that though. I can say best female homicide detective I've ever encountered, for sure.
Thank you.
I mean, there's some great ones, but you definitely are in the top two.
Thank you.
Top one of female detectives.
Well,
although
I'll take that.
I want to give a shout out to Michelle Bradbury from Costa Mesa, because she was amazing too. And she was a brand new homicide detective. And she crossed every T and dotted every I on that one case that we did together. Hats off to you, Bradbury. Yeah. And she moved up to the ranks. She's not a detective anymore. I think she's a big shot, but she might be sergeant or lieutenant. She moved up, and but she was great. She was amazing too. So you're both in the tie for first, but you were absolutely the best sexual assault detective that I worked with. And I don't even remember how many cases we worked together as sexual assault.
Oh, we had quite a few.
We had quite a few, but one of the things that I loved about you was you just got those defendants to sing like birds, baby. You really did. I can hear the birds singing right now. That's Julissa. She's making them sing, right?
I got to thank my father for this. He raised me to really not be judgmental. And I know it's hard especially when you're working a case where, you learn that this individual is having intercourse with an 8-year-old. And, it's easy to get angry and, walk into that room just being, pissed off, like, how dare you? But I always kind of took that step of there's something that caused them to do this. And with sexual assault cases, oftentimes we have no physical evidence. Right? It's late reported. And so the only way you're going to make this case is to have the defendant tell you what happened. And so, my approach was always to not be judgmental and figured they have a story to tell. And if I can get them to tell me my story, even though sometimes the story was bullshit, then hopefully the victim would at least, have some validation that, of what happened to them and be able to heal from that trauma. And so I took that responsibility very seriously. And I always walked into that room and tried to become their best friend and have them trust me to tell me what they had done. And I still remember, and I'll never forget this, one case that I had. He was molesting his 8-year-old niece. He had intercourse with her. And during my conversation with him, he wanted to hold my hand. And he wanted to caress my hand as he's telling me what he had done. And every bone in my body is wanting to pull my hand away, of course. Mm-hmm. But it's what I needed to make him feel comfortable to tell me what he had done. And of course, he, in his sick mind, tried to justify what he did. But, in the end, that moment of uncomfortableness was nothing compared to what that 8-year-old little girl had done. And it's what needed to be done in order to get him to tell me what he had did. So, I'm glad that I, as much as I hated it, let him do it so that he felt comfortable enough to give me a statement and ultimately get him convicted.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. It was a special skill that I loved watching because, I would watch all the interviews that you did. Any case that we had together where I, had a confession, and I was like, wow, she's really good. She's pretty amazing. I loved it. So yeah, hats off to you for all your years of hard work and dedication. And I brought you here today to talk about this one case in particular, and I might bring you back for our Christmas murder, maybe a Christmas special.
Oh, that was definitely a doozy. I still remember that being called out at 9 a.m. on Christmas morning. I think that was the case that almost sent my husband over the edge.
Yeah, I bet. Right, Christmas morning. Yeah, that's what people don't realize is like when you're a homicide prosecutor or a homicide detective, like it doesn't matter if it's New Year's Eve, your kid's birthday, some amazing event that, you're supposed to go watch somebody perform at. Like you have tickets to go see, Adele in Vegas and you paid $1,200 for the ticket. When you get called out, you get called out and you got to go. So not that I spent $1,200 on that ticket, Tom Brown, but it was a gift. Anyway, my husband killed me. Don't let him listen to this one, Pete. Pete's my producer. He's amazing. Okay, so I digress. Okay, we're talking about you getting called out in the middle. Oh, so that case that we worked on was a homicide case where this man actually beat his wife to death on Christmas Eve and then propped her body up on the couch while the kids opened up their Christmas presents that morning, Christmas morning. And it's a tragic story. The family that was, called out to that scene, they're amazing. They're amazing people. She's got a lovely family. And I would like to maybe bring them on. And at that time, I'm going to bring you back to talk about the investigation of that case and, the evidence and proving that case up. But right now, we're here to talk about the case of the serial killers that I know sometimes people heard a little snippet on the news about these two guys that were on GPS ankle bracelet monitoring bracelets when they were kidnapping and murdering women. And how many victims were there total?
There were 5. Kiana, Josephine, Martha, Sable, and Jure. Yeah.
So let's talk about we'll start from the beginning because, you can always tell a story, from the end. We just kind of told you the end, right? I already told you one's on death row and one got LWOP. But the investigation, the backstory behind it. When you were in the homicide detective, you were in the homicide unit as a detective and you get called out to what?
So it's funny. I firmly believe that homicide cases pick homicide detectives. I truly believe that because I was actually not supposed to get this case. But that particular day, we were actually all working. And we got a call from Republic Services, which is like the trash service that services the city of Anaheim. And they called to say that they had found a body on the conveyor belt. And it was the middle of the day. I still remember that I was actually giving a little talk at my stepdaughter's school. And we got called out to go to the trash recycling center. And I think that the dispatcher initially, didn't believe it. I think the workers initially thought it was a mannequin and then realized, no, it actually is a human being that's on this conveyor belt. So we responded out there, and that was like a crime scene that I've never seen before, right? There's nothing clean or sterile about it. And when we got there, we could tell it's a female. And she's wrapped up in all this trash and debris. And everything around her appears like it came from like some kind of construction site. And I remember looking at my partner, Bruce Lynn at the time, and thinking to myself, where do we even start? As homicide detectives, you're thinking, okay, what's around my crime scene? We're thinking DNA, fingerprints.
Right. What can this scene tell us about who did this or how this person ended up here or what happened? And then you're now at was it a recycling center or a trash dump?
So it's both. They recycle trash there, but it also is the intake for all the trash for the city of Anaheim, and it eventually ends up on a landfill. So there's rats running around.
Oh.
Pigeons flying up above, and the conveyor belt is huge. It's about 6 feet across And it's, long, and you're like, well, we can't take everything. So I don't even know how we decided. I think it was just like, yeah, this looks good. So we went 20 feet in each direction and
collected everything.
Not everything. We were like, anything that has an address. Because at that time we were like, if we can possibly identify where she came from, then that might lead us to maybe video, potential, like for lack of a better term, the dump location might give us more information than what we have here.
So when you say where she came from, you mean what facility or what trash dumpster was this body put in to be deposited at the main hub facility that processes the trash?
Exactly. Okay. We learned a lot about trash collection in the city of Anaheim, and overall, I have a newfound appreciation for trash and what we throw away and how much waste we have as, we human beings create. But hats down to Republic Services. They are a well-oiled machine. They told us that they could tell us exactly where the trash had come from because they keep track of routes. The trash trucks had cameras. Unfortunately, at the time, they didn't record. So we knew that wasn't going to help us. But we thought, okay, if we can figure out where exactly the route, we can maybe start our canvas that way, and maybe that'll lead us to something. Because we looked at this scene and we're like, we don't even know where to start.
Yeah, I can't even imagine you'd know where to start. And I'm guessing in your years as a homicide detective, what year was this, 2014?
2014.
And so how long had you been a detective at that point?
4 years.
Okay, so 4 years, you'd handled multiple homicides.
I had. You could tell from the beginning this is different. She was nude, so we had no ID. So even just identifying her, became...
Right, because if you find out like she's, Heather Brown and her husband's angry and has a mistress and just took out an insurance policy, you can narrow things down a little more.
Exactly.
Oh, maybe it was the husband, and you figure out where he dumps the trash. But if you don't even know who your victim is, and if I end up in the trash dumpster, it was Tom Brown. No, I'm just kidding. He would never kill me. Not that way anyway, I would think.
You know too many people.
I do.
Yeah.
He'd probably just smother me with a pillow. Anyway, or just keep me alive and torture me for the rest of our lives.
Oh, let's not talk about that.
I know I'm making jokes and this is not funny, but we have to laugh. Otherwise, we'd just sit here and cry the whole podcast, right?
I agree, yes.
Yeah. So please don't take this as me not understanding the gravity that these beautiful women were murdered and taken from their families. Because I do appreciate and respect the gravity of it. And I know you do too.
Yeah. I think if... You have to have some kind of humor.
It's gallows humor. You have to have it. Yeah, I have to have it.
I think homicide detectives are the worst. Our humor is just dark.
Nice. Yes, they are. But I think sexual assault detectives and DAs are the worst. Because, really, think about it. You're just talking about the most horrible things. Oh, I forgot to give a warning. Probably a little late for this. But I just want to tell y'all listening, if you're squeamish or dark topics, this podcast is not for young children. It's not for anyone who doesn't drink. I'm just kidding. It's not for anyone who has a hard time listening to the darkest stories, because this is the darkest, probably the darkest of them all. Although I know that Terry Shields one was a doozy, but this is a doozy too. So I'm warning you. I'm giving a trigger warning. We're going to talk about some dark things, sexual assault, because I want to break down this case. I think it's a fascinating case as to how you proved this case. From a detective standpoint, I think it's fascinating too, and a psychological standpoint too. There's some we've had some interesting experiences during this case. So you then are trying to figure out, you're standing there with Bruce Lynn, who I just love that guy, by the way. He's so smart.
Who doesn't love Bruce Lynn?
I know. He is one of the smartest guys, right? He's super smart and knows everything there is to know about cell phone towers and pinging records and cross-sectional And the DA's office has him now, right? He's an expert there.
He left me. I'm still mad at him for that.
I know. I don't blame you, but we got him. So I was happy because he helped me on that murder case I was just talking about with Michelle Bradbury. He helped me with the whole thing. So thanks. Shout out to you, Bruce Lynn. You're amazing. You did great work on that one and this one. And so back to you. So you're there with Bruce Lynn. You're like, what are we going to do? How do we figure out who this gal is and where did her body come from? So what do you do next? Tell us.
Well, one of my partners who just recently retired and is now at your office, you keep stealing all the good ones.
Yeah.
Sergeant Lillimon, who was Detective Lillimon at the time. It was supposed to be his case, but he was leaving for vacation. And so he ended up, the case ended up getting transferred to me purely because he was going to go on vacation. But he starts looking at the tattoos on the victim. And at the time, we've always had a prostitution problem on Beach Boulevard. It's one of the main corridors. It's on the circuit for working girls. And when we contact girls on the boulevard, we try to document tattoos, possibly who their pimp is, where are they staying, to try to combat that problem. And we ended up finding out that Jeray had actually been in Anaheim the year prior. And she had been stopped by one of our officers. And that officer did a phenomenal job and documented her tattoos. And so from a tattoo that was on her neck, it said Jody. It's her mother's name. We were able to identify that the victim was Jeray Estep. And from that, we were able to, not only know, okay, she's been in Anaheim, she was contacted on the boulevard, she's working as a prostitute. So that kind of opened up a little bit, right? So now we're thinking, okay.
That's a lead.
That's definitely a lead. Our next step was we need to figure out where she was staying, right? If we can figure out maybe where she was staying, that's going to open up some more avenues for us. So we quickly made a flyer with her picture on it. And we went and started walking the boulevard, going from hotel to motel to see if she had been staying at any of the local places that we know that prostitution is big.
Yeah, and it is a big problem. Can I tell you a little secret?
Yeah,
a little story?
Yeah.
So when I was a baby DA, back in the 1900s, a long time ago. It was so long ago. Okay, I was the vice deputy, right? And I never knew that vice is like for everybody's vices, right? All the things like gambling, drinking and prostitution,
Yeah.
And I was the vice deputy, so I handled all the prostitution cases out of Westcourt. And I was such a gung-ho, prosecutor. And I feel like I'd like to believe that I held that, belief throughout my career, but I always wanted to go to the scene. I always wanted to know everything I could know about any type of case so that I was one up on the defense attorney. Right. So even if it was a theft from Costco, I would go and look at the Costco. And I didn't want to just rely on the police report. And so I talked to the deputies, the police officers that did their sting operations. And I said, I want to know how your programs work. I want to know how your operations work. So they invited me out to a sting operation on Beach Boulevard, which you just mentioned is a heavily, high amount of prostitution. And one of the things is it goes into Disneyland and Anaheim, right? Beach Boulevard goes all the way from Stanton.
It goes, so it's Buena Park into Stanton.
Okay. It's not, okay.
Well, at the time also in 2014, there was a strip on Harbor that they also worked, and that is near Disneyland. And so we focused on both. But yes.
Yes. So Beach Boulevard and Harbor. I think I was on Beach. I wasn't on Harbor. So I went out on Beach Boulevard. It was Beach Boulevard. And, there were a string of like seedy motels, and some of the motels don't like the prostitution in their hotel because it drives away business for legitimate, people. So I went out on this sting operation, and I was fascinated at all the people involved and how much it takes to do these sting operations. And there were female undercover detectives that were going out and as undercover prostitutes, right? So they were cops dressed up like prostitutes. Anyway, and then they had a takedown room. And it's my understanding, didn't you dress up like a prostitute sometimes?
Yes, I did it several times. I did it when I was brand new. And I continued to do it I did it while I was in homicide too. And it's kind of funny. You dress up and you're like, well, what does a prostitute dress up like? And you end up realizing, because at first I would, do all my makeup and, try to look pretty. And then you realize, no, that's not what you need to look like. And then by the end, I was putting on fingernail polish and letting it chip off for a couple of days, not washing my hair. And that seemed to work better. But yeah, as you get older,
they probably suspected you were a cop because your manicure, right?
Right. Yeah. The cleaner you were, they were like, oh, you're a cop. But it's funny. The older you get, I would be like, what about if nobody wants to pick me up?
Well, funny you should say that because so I went out on this sting operation.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, this actually looks like fun because it's acting. And when you're a police officer, it's like you're acting, right?
Yes.
And I thought, you guys look like a lot of fun. And they're like, do you want to try it? Right. Now, mind you, I'm the DA, right? So I'm like, I don't know that I could do that. And they're like, well, we won't arrest the guy. We'll just agree in advance. We'll let the guy go. But so you can get an idea what it is. I'm like, I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, I don't even have anything to wear. So they gave me some clothes to wear. They gave me like red pleather pants and anyway, But at the time I was dating my now husband, but we were just dating and he called me and he's like, hey, baby, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm about to go out on Beach Boulevard and drum up some money. Yeah. And then I thought, what if I did think that, Julissa? I thought, what if nobody solicits me?
I know.
Right. And I was young. I was, I had it going on back then. Not so much anymore, but I thought, oh God, but I did. I dressed up and I went out there and then I was being an idiot because I'm an idiot, but I went with another detective. They weren't going to just let me go alone.
Yeah.
And so I remember this creepy guy with this ZZ Top beard came up and he was like petting his beard. And so I started messing because I knew everybody was listening and recording it.
Yeah.
I should find that recording. I still have it somewhere. They were calling me Angel. Angel was my stage name. And I was saying, how much for the both of us? And I was telling him like, oh, my friend here, she loves butt sex. And I was just saying stuff to make the other detectives laugh.
Yeah.
But it was, we caught so many guys that day. And one guy, when we took him in the takedown room, he actually defecated on himself. He was so scared when they busted him in the room.
We used to do, day-long sting operations. And I used to think like, oh, I want to be the last female to go because, it'll be easier at night. And then I quickly learned like, no, lunch hour is the best time. So I'd want to go first. And like lunch hour, it was surreal to me that I would walk out and in less than 5 minutes on Beach Boulevard, I would get solicited. And then you found yourself arguing with these guys over the price. And I remember one sergeant, pulling me aside and he's like, Julissa, you don't actually have to do the sex act. Like whatever they offer you is good enough. I'm like, I have principles.
Yeah, you're like, no,
give them a blowjob for $40. No, 60 is my minimum. So yeah, it was funny. So, but we had fun with it. It was, trying to work in lines from Pretty Woman.
Oh, I love it.
Like, what's your name? What do you want it to be? So yeah.
Yeah. So, we're laughing about it, but honestly, obviously now, 20 something, 30 years later, I realize, that these girls that are working, my heart goes out to anyone that is forced to make money that way or even is making money that way, because that has got to be the hardest job on the planet, honestly. To have sex with strange men for money has got to be a really daunting task,
Oh, for sure.
And I joke, but I'm married and I love my husband, and I don't even want to have sex every night. I can't imagine having sex with 15 strangers all day every day, and some of them are mean and gross, and it's got to be really hard. And I know a lot of those girls are doing it because they've suffered trauma in the past.
Yes.
And they've been sexually assaulted. They had to run away from home and some pimp snatched them up, and now they're being forced to do that. It's kind of become their identity, so they continue doing that. They've convinced themselves that this is the way to make money and lots of it quickly. And so those women that are doing that are somebody's daughter, They're somebody's mom at times. They're,
Yeah.
and so it's very, it's a very, very hard and sad life. And it breaks my heart to think that anybody has to earn a living doing that. So you learn now that, let's go back to the case, you learn that Jure is working as a prostitute or had been.
Yes.
On Beach Boulevard, where there's heavily, in which city?
In Anaheim.
In Anaheim. Okay, so she'd been in Anaheim, and now you and Detective Lynn start hunting down more clues.
Yeah, it wasn't just me and Detective Lynn. At that time, we had 5 homicide detectives, and Anaheim is unique in the fact that we work cases as a whole, like collectively as a group.
Oh.
There is a lead detective, but honestly, all of our cases is a group effort. And so when we solve a case, it's not just a singular detective that did it. It really is the whole entire group. Initially, it was the 5 of us, and we all started passing out flyers to try to figure out where she had been. And detective at that time, who is now a lieutenant, Danny Gonzalez, found where Jure had been staying at the Anaheim Lodge on Beach Boulevard. And it was one of those...
Was that found just from the beat cops going around with the flyer?
From one of the homicide detectives that was working the streets. Yeah, knocking on doors.
So Detective Lynn was able to use this flyer and get information that Jure had been staying at this hotel.
It was actually Detective Gonzalez, but yeah, Detective Lynn was also out there with us. So we had basically divided the city and said everybody kind of go separate ways. So Detective Gonzalez calls me and he says, hey, she's staying at the Anaheim Lodge. So of course we all rushed over there and talked to the motel clerk. Ended up finding out that Jure had rented the room for a night. And they told us that, she failed to check out, so they cleaned out the room. And so we asked, well, can we see it anyways? And
now, what do you recall? I know it was a long time ago, what day this was?
So we found her on March 14th. So she had checked in March 13th.
Oh, okay. So it's only been, so now she was alive the day before.
Right. So, and as homicide detectives, that's an important part. I always want to know, how far ahead is my killer? How far behind am I from him or her? So we know that we're about 24 hours behind. And so they let us look at the room, and it did look like had been serviced. But we looked around and we ended up finding out that they didn't clean out a drawer. And inside the drawer was Jure's wallet, some candy, and a large amount of cash. So she had, that kind of led me to believe that she had been very busy. And at the time, I'm obviously thinking, my logical suspect's the last John she picked up. And so it became a race of trying to identify who she had been with in those 24 hours. And that's where Bruce Lynn comes in, the phone guru, right? We end up finding out what Jure's phone number is, and we start working her phone.
And so you're able to get phone records?
Yes. At the time, it was a lot easier. We didn't have all the restrictions that we do now. And we got her phone number from her mother. I had tried to do a death notification, ended up finding out that Jure's mother is in Oklahoma. And so, an in-person notification was not going to be possible. I had to make a choice. Do I fly to Oklahoma and tell this mother that her daughter is dead, or do I stay here and work? And I know that the first 48 hours are so crucial in a homicide case. So,
and why is that for our listeners?
Statistically, if you don't solve the case within the first 48 hours, the chances of you solving that case dramatically drops.
Wow.
And if you think of it as a puzzle, you are trying to collect as many puzzle pieces as you can to basically put it together. And I find that there are more puzzle pieces to collect in those first 48 hours before things disappear, before things get cleaned up, before witnesses leave. And so...
Can I just stop you for a second?
Yeah.
I just got the weirdest, creepiest feeling. The noise that I'm hearing, because we're outside, is the trash truck.
Yeah. I can't look at a Republic Service trash truck.
Mine's a different waste management, but yeah, that's...
Every blue dumpster that I see reminds me of them. Every trash truck that passes by reminds me of them.
I wanted to actually bring this up. It was something that I think I heard you say on a different podcast about this case. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
That we're talking about this and the trash truck comes.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're saying that you see a trash truck, you see a dumpster, and it reminds you of this case. I thought I was the only, I don't know, I don't think I thought I was the only one, but when I drive around, no matter where I am in Orange County, every corner or where I think, oh, that was where that lady got dragged and had her head run over. Oh, that's where that little kid got kidnapped from. Oh, I just see horrible things everywhere I go. There's no escaping unless we move.
Yeah.
Right. But even then, like you said, there's going to be trash trucks in Montana or wherever you're moving to, right? After you double dip and then retire, right? There's always going to be something that reminds us of the cases that we've worked and the people that have impacted our lives from their deaths or their tragedy.
Yeah. 14 years in homicide, the city of Anaheim is one huge crime scene to me. And now that I've gone back to patrol, and I don't know, maybe this is the morbid in me. I visit the scenes where my victims pass, and especially on the anniversary of their death, and say a little prayer for them. But yeah, especially now being back in patrol, when I drive by, I can't help but to think, oh yeah, that's where that happened, and that's where this happened, and I have a very vivid mind, so, I get flashes of what, I've seen before. And, sometimes it's not pleasant.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. It is. Yeah. I think we're forever scarred from the profession we chose, just in terms of what we see and think about, even though I'm out of that realm right now, I still drive around and see
it's never going to leave you.
No.
But I think that having that in you, like you do, like I said, you're a little spitfire. I'm so grateful to have worked with you. That's, even though we internalize a little bit of that darkness, it's what makes us better at what we did. So
yeah, you need people who are willing to do that. You just do, and so I figure, why not me, right? God gave me the ability to handle it and, use my experiences for something good. So why not me? I might as well use it for good for other people.
Also helped that you were damn good at it too.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Thank you. So, okay. So, wow. So now I don't want to, jump over this part too much, but, so you have to make this death notification to Jeray's mom.
Yes.
And how old was Juray when she was brutally snatched from
I believe she was 21. She's very young.
Very young.
Yes. Mother.
She was a mom too.
She was. Yeah. Nehemiah. Great kid, playing football right now. In Oklahoma, being raised by his grandmothers, and they're doing a phenomenal job at it.
Oh, that's awesome. So, I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah. So I tried to call Jody, and she wouldn't pick up the phone. And so I had to send a deputy out there, and he knew that she was inside, but she wouldn't answer the door. So I said, can you please just leave her a note? And so he did. And we had worked pretty much into the night, and I had just gotten home, I want to say at 6 a.m. And then about 2 hours later, my phone starts ringing, and I could tell it's an Oklahoma area code. So I pick up the phone, and it's Jody. And I am trying to extract as much information from her as I can before I give her the news, and which is, to this day, I think it's the cruelest thing I have to do, and it's not something that I want to do. But I know that the minute I tell them what had happened, my chances of getting information from them, is going to drop, and I can understand it, right? The last thing they want to do is talk to me when I've just given them the worst news of their life. And Jody was not having it. She's like, you tell me why you are calling, or I am not going to talk to you. And at one point she hung up on me. And yeah. And so I'm like, okay. And so I had to give her, the worst news that she's ever received in her entire life. And she ended up putting her sister on the phone, Yolanda. And the most I was able to get out of them was that she had been in Oklahoma, that she had traveled to California, and that she had a pimp. And so they gave me Jeray's number and they gave me the pimp's number. And from there, Bruce Lynn was able to work his magic because obviously the pimp became, suspect number one.
Yeah,
for me.
suspect number one. That's who I'm thinking.
Yeah. So Bruce Lynn at the time was able to work his magic and we were able to rule him out pretty quickly because he was in Oklahoma.
Okay. Had an alibi.
He had an alibi for sure. A pretty good one. Yeah, he's out of state. Okay. And so we started working Jeray's phone records and trying to identify who she had been talking to, who were her last Johns. And that's kind of how the investigation started.
Okay. So did you find a John that you thought might have been the last one?
We found two that were within the time. So Bruce Lynn was able to tell me that her phone basically went dead, turned off. Something happened to the phone. It's been disabled around 7 p.m. at night.
Okay.
And the previous phone call had been like maybe 20 minutes prior. So he's looking pretty good. And end up, doing a workup on him and end up finding out Hispanic male worker. We end up doing a surveillance on him and he's just your regular average hardworking guy. Looks like he's got a wife and some kids. And, I had to make a decision. Do we continue to watch him or do we make contact with him? And there's no right or wrong. At that time, as a homicide detective, sometimes you just need to trust your instincts. And so I'm like, okay, let's stop him.
Now, you got to, at that moment, decide, do I knock on the door? Because, right, he's got a wife and kids and he's going to a prostitute, right?
Right.
And that might limit your chances, don't you think, of him, talking? He'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, at the time, we did not stop him at his house.
Okay.
But we made contact with him. And he had committed a minor violation, but it was enough for me to bring him to the station. And so we brought him to the station and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go in there and talk to this guy about what happened. And okay, he's the last guy, to be alive, possibly with Jeray. And he ended up being very cooperative, very open. He's like, yes, I did pick up a prostitute. I picked her up on the boulevard. He tells me that they made an agreement for $40 for 10 minutes, which I had never heard of an arrangement being time-wise, but he wanted 10 minutes with her. And so he told me he went to the motel and they had sex and that when he left, she was very much alive. Asked him for his DNA. He consented. And that was the end of our interaction at that point. I was like, okay. He had sex with her and this is it. So he just didn't strike me as I'm the one that murdered her. And so I thought, okay, he was only with her 10 minutes and it was definitely enough time for Jeray to get back out on the boulevard.
But at that time, did you eliminate him as a suspect? Or you were just he's a possibility, but I'm not feeling it. I don't.
Correct. Okay. And sometimes, when you're working these cases, you have to, and I used to train homicide detectives for a while. And I used to tell them, sometimes pretend that you are in the middle of a room and there's doors all around you. And those are all different avenues that you can take in this investigation. There's no right or wrong which door you take. You're in a circle, but you have to pick one. And you take the door, you follow that lead, and there'll come a point where you realize, I'm going down the right path, or maybe I need to turn around. And you can come right back to the center. And that doesn't mean you have to close that door. It just means I know what's behind that one.
Let me go open another.
Let me go open up another one.
Got you.
And so from him, I decided I'm going back to the center and I'm going to take another door. Okay. And every homicide detective works their cases differently. Bruce Lynn is a very methodical, piece by piece collector of that puzzle. I'm very frantic. Kind of like you, right? I am just how many can I get all at one time, right? I will figure out where they go later. For me, I'm just frantically collecting puzzle pieces before they disappear, and I'll figure out where they go later. So that's what we did. So we worked him, and then we kind of worked our way backwards. Simultaneously, at the same time, my partner, Detective John Duran, who is now retired, and we're all very sad about that.
He was a great detective, right?
Phenomenal detective.
Yeah,
he did
I never
it for
worked with him.
26 years as a homicide detective. I don't know how he did it. But he was working the trash. And we joke that he became a garbologist. He got his certificate from YouTube. And he was basically following all the leads that the trash company had been able to give us of everywhere they had collected trash. And so he was taking groups of officers. When I say that we work it as a group, there were 75 people at Anaheim PD that worked this case.
Wow.
So while Bruce and I are doing this, he's taking groups of detectives and going from location to location, trying to see if any of the trash that was around Jure, if we went to these dumpsters, if the trash looked similar. So, we ended up working this case for a month. And by the time the month was over, I was so used to sticking my head into a trash can that it was like second nature to me. Everywhere I went, I'm like, I gotta look in the trash. Literally became obsessed with trash. So he was doing that as we were following other leads. So it was all hands on deck.
Wow. A lot of resources going into this.
For sure.
Now, at this point, ultimately, we know that there were other victims that were murdered by the same people that killed Jure. But at this point, are you aware that this case is linked to any other cases?
Oh, never in a million years did I think I was going to find myself in the middle of a serial killer case. As a matter of fact, I was aware that women had been disappearing in Santa Ana, purely because I like watching the news in Spanish. It kind of helps keep my Spanish fresh. And so I had seen news stories about them. And when the first, one girl, two girls, three girls, you do think, there's something there. So I had seen, the families frustrated. But I just didn't
put it together.
I think not that I didn't put it together. I think there's just a part of you that doesn't want to believe it. You don't want to believe that this is happening. This is happening in your community, and that there's this evil out there taking women and killing them. It's like things of the movies, right?
Right.
My department at the time wanted me to talk to the other agencies just to see. So we did hold a meeting with all the different agencies that were missing women, just to see if we could share information and, is there any kind of similarities? So we did have a meeting, and that's where I first met an FBI agent, Jeff Cano.
I love Jeff.
He's amazing.
He's a great guy.
Yes.
He's a great guy.
If all FBI agents could be like him,
he's funny too. He's got quite a sense of humor.
Oh, he's just witty.
We love you, Jeff Cano. We're giving shout out to you.
Yes, we do. He also retired. Makes me sad. Mm-hmm. I ended up talking with him and saying, hey, I don't think so, but just FYI, is there any kind of resources you can offer me? And he's like, I'll keep you in mind. Let me know, what you find. And if you end up finding out their link, of course, there's resources we can offer you. It was my first time I had a conversation with Larry Yellen, Judge Yellen.
Now a judge. He was a former prosecutor in the Orange County DA's office, and a great one at that.
Oh, gosh, yes.
And now he's sitting on the bench, so he can't come on the podcast because the judges aren't allowed to. But
I remember telling him, hey, my agency's, making me talk to these other agencies. And I remember him kind of like laughing. He's like, you think you're working a serial killer? I'm like, no, but I'm just letting you know that we had this meeting. And he's like, okay, just, keep me up to date.
Because he was your homicide DA.
He was.
He covered Anaheim.
At the time, yes.
Yeah, for our listeners, when you're in the homicide unit, you are assigned agencies, and you handle and work any of the cases that the agencies, any homicides that come through. So Anaheim, It was Larry Yellen. Was it just Larry?
Just Larry at the time,
There's a couple agencies that get two. Yeah, I was Garden Grove and Costa Mesa and Los Alamitos.
We've had a lot of luck with, honestly, all the homicide DAs are phenomenal, but there's definitely ones that hold a special place in my heart, like Larry Yellen and Janine Madera, Chris Alex.
Oh, Chris Alex is amazing.
Yes.
Janine's great.
Yes.
All hardworking people who just care so much and give these cases their everything.
Yeah, and then we were fortunate, that you came and played along with us for a little bit. Mm-hmm. The leftovers.
Yeah, I got this case
or the overflows, not leftovers. Overflows.
I think I got this from Matt Murphy, right? Was he?
No, it went to Larry Yellen, then Cynthia Herrera, now Judge Herrera.
Oh, that's where I got it from. Yeah. So when I went into the homicide unit, Cynthia became a judge, and I absorbed her caseload. And she had this case. So I had it while I was in the homicide unit. And then when I retired, Jennifer Walker took this case.
Yes. And I think part of it is, if the listeners don't know, it was a death penalty case.
Yes.
And not every homicide DA can do a death penalty case. You guys are the chosen ones. And so, that's how it ended up with you and then Jennifer Walker, ultimately.
Yeah. And ultimately, here we are. So, okay, backing up. So tell us a little bit, let's go back to the women in Santa Ana that were missing, that you said that you saw it on a news reel.
Yeah, it was the news.
Okay.
I was watching, I think I saw it twice. I think I saw it once on Channel 7 or Channel 5, and then I had also seen it on the Mexican news station. They were just covering the story of, ultimately, it was Priscilla and Erlinda, the Josephine's mom and Martha's mom, that were putting up flyers in Santa Ana. I believe on Univision, they were talking about how the mothers were very frustrated. They were holding vigils.
So 2 women turned up missing to their families.
Correct.
Okay. And those women, Martha
Anaya, yes. And Josephine Vargas.
Josephine Vargas. So Martha Anaya and Josephine Vargas go missing. And what are the circumstances of their disappearance?
So they were both working women.
They were both working as prostitutes?
They were. And they were actually number 2 and number 3. Kiana Jackson was the first one to disappear in early October of 2013.
October of 2013.
Yes.
And so you're now working Jure Estep's disappearance, and now we know murder.
Yes.
In
March of 2014.
March of 2014.
So here we are, like 6 months later.
Okay, so the first one ends up being October 2013.
Yes.
And that was Kiana Jackson.
Yes.
Okay, let's start with Kiana. Tell us about Kiana's disappearance.
Kiana, oh gosh, her smile was so infectious. Her mother, Kathy.
She's an amazing woman.
She is.
I've had many conversations with her, and she's just filled with hope and light.
I know.
And
she is. I love her. I'm very blessed to be able to have a relationship and a friendship with her. I'm very grateful to have met her. Unfortunately, I wish it was under different circumstances. But, she raised Kiana in a very small town up in Northern California. And Kiana went away to college, to Las Vegas. And that is where she met an individual that became her boyfriend. And ultimately, he ended up being a pimp and turned Kiana into a prostitute.
Gosh, what is wrong with these men? Stop buying and selling women. Stop it. It's disgusting. It's wrong. These are people's daughters and mothers. And, there's plenty of girls that will have sex with you. Well, maybe not you, because you're pimps and you're horrible.
Yeah.
But for free. But, stop. Stop selling girls. It's disgusting.
And Kiana, she was beautiful and she was smart and she had so much potential. And just unfortunately, hooked up with the wrong guy and wanted to please him and ultimately started working as a prostitute. So she had come to Costa Mesa, Santa Ana, working the circuit, and she found herself on First Street in Santa Ana and disappeared. Her mom knew immediately something was wrong because she was in constant contact with Kiana. Kiana was very active on social media. She would text Kathy all the time. Kathy was completely unaware that Kiana was involved in this. And so when Kiana just stopped answering her phone, she knew instantly something's wrong. And so she started trying to report her missing. And she tried to report her missing first in her hometown. And they told her that she needed to report her missing in whatever city she had gone missing in, which is completely not accurate. Any police department can take a missing person's report. As a matter of fact, they're mandated to take it.
I didn't know that. Do you hear that, listeners? Any police department is mandated to take a missing persons report.
That is correct.
And then they share the information, right? With whatever last known.
Yeah. So,
area.
example, if somebody happens to be visiting Anaheim and somebody goes missing, they last went missing maybe in, let's just say, Texas, we will take that police report and then we will forward that report to Texas. It's ultimately their responsibility to investigate it, but we are required to take it and pass along the information so that there is no lag and so that missing person gets entered into the missing person database as quickly as possible. That is the whole purpose behind it. But Kathy struggled to report her daughter missing. It took 6 different police departments before somebody finally took the missing persons report. And, Kathy will tell you this story herself, but
I am going to try and get her on the podcast so she can talk about her experience.
It broke my heart when she told me that the officer that took the report ultimately said, your daughter's a prostitute. Well, Kathy had no idea. And so she's trying to report her daughter missing. This is how she finds out that Kiana's been involved in prostitution.
Oh my gosh.
So she ends up reporting her missing. And then 2 weeks later, Josephine goes missing.
That's Josephine Vargas.
Correct. And Josephine had her demons. She had been working as a prostitute for a while, struggling with drug addiction. But nonetheless, her family adored her, and she was very close to her mother and to her family, and also kept daily contact with her family. And she had told her family that she was going to go out shopping and get a few things from the grocery store, and then she never came home. And so they knew something instantly was wrong and reported her missing. And then a couple more weeks go by. And then on November 11th, Martha goes missing. And Martha had a very close relationship with her mother. She also had children that she would pick up from school. And I ended up finding out later that she had failed to pick up her daughter from school, which was very unusual. Erlinda was aware that Martha, I think, was working, and ultimately told the police department. She calls me nightly. And I learned later that Martha used to call her mom every night before she went to bed to get a blessing from her. Erlinda's very spiritual. And when Martha didn't do that, Erlinda immediately knew something was wrong. And she went and filed the missing persons report. And the common theme here was that all those 3 mothers had a really difficult time reporting their loved one missing because of the trade that they were in at the time, the lifestyle that they were supposedly involved in at the time. And so they grew very frustrated.
It is. I'm not defending, the police officers or the agencies, for not taking them seriously. It's a lesson. It's a lesson to learn here. I think that they're going to treat any missing persons report a little more seriously now, I would hope, in theory. But, it is a transient business. The girls that work, they call it the circuit, they move from place to place to place.
Yes.
And so it is a very transitory business. And there is oftentimes some drug addiction involved, or they disappear sometimes for a couple days, weeks, and then return. So in certain circumstances. But what's interesting, I think, about this case that I found interesting when I was reading through, the police reports and the case file, was all of these girls were very close to their moms and their family, yes. And they kept in daily communication with them.
They were very active on social media. Yes. They were very close to their mothers. They do all share that in common. Martha and Jure had children that they were raising, that they would never leave behind. So when they went missing, it was odd because it was very active, and then like they dropped off the face of the planet.
Wow. So the moms finally get these missing persons reports in the system.
Yes.
And they're, making concentrated efforts to try to locate their daughters, at least the ones that were here locally in Santa Ana. So we have Martha's mom.
Yep. Erlinda.
who was a lovely lady. I met her and Priscilla, who was Josephine's mom.
Yes.
And they actually became friends through this.
Yes, and they were a force to be reckoned with.
They sure were.
Yeah, I've never met two stronger women, and the bond that they share out of this evil that they had to face together is incredible. Two phenomenal ladies.
So these two moms are just like, where are our daughters? And nobody's looking for them, and we're going to go out and look for them ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I know that Martha, she also had a daughter, Melody, who was 14 or 12, excuse me.
She was 12 at the time.
12 at the time. She's coming on the podcast to share her story and her experience. So, stay tuned for that one. After you hear the full story from Detective Trapp, we're going to get down to the real, familial aspect of this and how it affects the children and the moms of these girls that were murdered. But they were actively, this family, even Melody was, working to help, make copies of the flyers and whatnot. But they were going out and posting, pictures of their loved ones and trying to get the media to help in locating their daughters. And they were met with, nothing, crickets. They didn't have any information as to what happened to their daughters and where they went. And so at this point, now you're working Jure's case, the young lady who turned up on the conveyor belt. We know that she's been murdered. Yes. Did they have a cause of death at that time?
Yes, strangulation.
Okay, so we know she's been strangled to death and stuck in a trash can somewhere and dumped, but we don't know where, and we don't know who yet. And you're chasing down the leads, and there's these other women who happen to be working as prostitutes who have turned up missing prior to Jure's body being found.
That's where we're at, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So bring us back to your investigation and how you solved this caper.
So we kept following the leads of the trash. I mean, that's what we were doing. We were going from every trash dumpster that we had, trying to figure out, okay, maybe we'll run into a video camera that gives us some lead.
I kind of remember, because I know your memory of the details are much greater than mine.
Yeah.
I remember there being a tube of caulking that was thrown away that Detective Lynn snatched up off the conveyor belt and bagged as evidence, and that gave you a little lead, right?
Yeah, so it's day 13, and so our forensic specialists are working methodically to process every piece of trash that we collected, looking for fingerprints. I knew DNA was probably not going to be the best option for me just because everything had been jumbled through the trash.
So there are these 3 women that are missing from Santa Ana. I mean, the last known location is somewhere in, I'm guessing, Santa Ana, right? Anaheim?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
So, and at that point, you don't know that they're connected in any way to Jure, but you've seen it on the news, and these families aren't getting any headway with regards to what happened to their daughters.
Right.
And I'm guessing that at some point, there's a break in the case that leads you to figure out that, oh my God, we actually have a serial killer on our hands.
Yes.
Wow. Well, we're out of time for today. So if you want to find out what happened and what the big break was, you got to tune in next time to Defeating the Darkness, where we follow up and finish this story with Detective Trapp. See you next time. And until next time, if you can't find the light, be the light, just like Detective Trapp.
Be the light, shine so bright.